Frank Klose. The mailbag is open. You can check it out at 973ESPN.com. Each and every week, the mailbag questions right here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. We're answering your mailbag questions. If you have a question for Frank and the Phillies, 609-403-0973. Send a text. Frank, what's going on, pal?
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
All right, Frank Klose here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. And I like the first question. JP Crawford, by the way, put on the DL. He's been in the Phillies system for a while. He feels very underwhelming. I was just thinking about this the other day. I said, JP Crawford was once the number one prospect in baseball. When you have a guy like that, you feel like that guy's like not a franchise changer specifically, but a difference maker, a potential all-star, multiple-time all-star. So what has happened with where he was as the number one overall prospect to what he has become?
I think we see this a lot with people who are drafted out of high school. It just takes so long from them being drafted to actually making the major leagues. I mean, not many of them are Ken Griffey Jr. and make their debut at age 19. So yeah, he has been around for a while, but really he's not old. I think when I look at JP Crawford this season, I think we can agree that he's been underwhelming at the plate, right? Yeah, I think we can agree his defense has had its blips. 5 errors. That's a lot of errors. When you consider you're like 1/6 of the way through the season, that's a 30-error pace. That's not good enough in the major leagues. However, I think we still need to give him some time to sort of develop as a player in the major league, to get used to the major league. He really did earn that call up through some really strong play down the stretch last year. So I think that with Crawford, you just still need to give him some steady at bats, and a month into the season, we're not going to really let him settle into where he needs to be as a major league player. And I realize it's frustrating because you have all these high expectations from somebody who was labeled the top prospect in baseball for a while, and definitely the top prospect on the Phillies. But he really needs some time to really see what he can do. And really, if you're the Phillies and you want to compete in 2018 and you want to spend your money on some top free agents that could include a possible shortstop, you really need to give him this year to see if he's got it. And really, it's early. It hasn't looked good. But I will say on top of that, we have seen some flashes of brilliance. We had a few game stretch where he seemed to be hitting very, very well. He's made some really nice plays in the field. So I think it's way too early to sort of write him off, and I think if anything, it's been the high expectations which have led people to be a little frustrated now, because if he didn't have that prospect tag, then you might not have worried so much about how he's doing 1 month into his first season.
Frank, it might just be me. The 2 Phillies games I've gone to, he was batting .083, and he came up to bat in a key situation against the Marlins at Citizens Bank Park, and I was there, and Mike Gill says I'm the mush. And then I went on Saturday night, and that's where he got the arm strain issue when he tried to throw the guy out at first there when he went into the hole, deep into the hole. So maybe it's just me, Frank. I must be the problem.
Yeah, and really, he's going to bat low in the lineup, but he's not going to totally kill them offensively while he figures it out. So still plenty of time to go.
Home run last night from the catching position, but Theo wants to know if the Phillies catchers continue to struggle, how would you expect the Phillies to address that issue next season? Do you think they'd make any moves to improve the position this season?
To a certain extent, the Phillies have really kind of opened up the catching position to just young guys. That doesn't happen a lot. Often teams have a veteran-type player that kind of is there to nurture the next young guy along. But they were in a situation where they have Alfaro, they have Knapp. Alfaro, he's got a tremendous arm. He's got some really strong power, which you saw with that home run, right? I mean, he can really crush a baseball. And when you have somebody like Knapp, who traditionally has gotten on base a lot and has a nice swing, and he's a switch hitter. I mean, how many teams would love to have their backup catcher be a switch hitter? They realized that they were just going to have to ride out some lumps early. Now, if you look at Knapp's performance, he has 3 pass balls. I think we're seeing way too many pass balls from Andrew Knapp, with the ones that he's either called pass balls or not called pass balls. Collectively, the catchers have more errors than any other catchers in baseball, any other team, with 7. So we know that there have been some shortcomings right now. Now, one thing that the Phillies did do this year, which they have not in the past, they made Bob Stumpo a catching instructor, and Craig Driver joined the team. He's also going to be in the bullpen during games with Stumpo. He's the receiving coach. So they have two coaches really dedicated to sort of shepherding them along and bringing them where they need to be. But very much like Crawford, you need 2018 to know what you have. And I think with the Phillies, we all kind of expect that there's going to be a point where they're just going to put their foot on the accelerator and say, yeah, we're going for it. We're going all in. If this is what they're getting, then they might find a veteran to come join the club. But if they can bring them along in the interim, that's great for them. So I think that maybe if they see this type of play all season, but I think their hope is that, again, they're just young players. This is really the first time they're getting this much playing time, even though Knapp has been around a little bit. They're going to let them try to develop before they do anything.
And speaking of veterans joining the club, it's only a month into the season, but Kevin already wants to know if the Phillies are going to be buyers at the deadline, which position would they target and whom? If they sell, who do they look to unload?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of that question really is probably about the two positions we've just been talking about where we've seen some play that is, not less than standard at those positions. And part of this is probably fueled, too, because Ken Rosenthal reported the other day that the Orioles will probably trade Manny Machado at the trade deadline. If you're the Phillies, I think a lot depends where you're landing, where you kind of are, where you see yourself going way down at the July 31st trade deadline. Because right now, if you look at the Phillies winning percentage and multiply it by 162 games, you get 92.5 wins. Now, do you think the Phillies will be a 92.5 win? Well, of course, you can't win half a game, but do you think the Phillies will be a 92.5 win team at the end of the season? I think a lot of people would kind of scale that number back a little bit. So they're probably going to have to get to a point where, you see some talent. We see the struggles that we've talked about just now. They're going to get to a point towards the trade deadline where they're going to have to ask themselves the question, do we want to go for it, or do we want to kind of let this ride and really see what they can do in the free agency next year that's going to be very, very strong. Some teams may just, like the Phillies might just decide that, if we make some trades now, we're going to be giving up on talent at a higher price when we could just sign these guys as free agents later, Manny Machado in particular. So a lot will depend on just how far ahead or out they are at the time. And really, if the cost is high, they might not want to do that because they might just sit there and think, well, we'll sign somebody in the off season, we'll be fine. But at the same time, too, they don't want to undo what this season's supposed to be, which is to really still see in certain positions like catching, like shortstop. You could throw in starters like Velasquez and Eichhoff, what they really have, and they might do the team a disservice long term if they kind of skip ahead there. So there's so many factors here that it's really hard to say right now, but I think if they're at the point where there's something that perhaps they could just use financial flexibility to take advantage of, they're in a position to do it, but there's too many question marks right now to really kind of project that far ahead.
A couple quick hitters with Frank here. Some injuries. You got Lively down, Eflin up, Arano down. Who is up in the bullpen in his spot?
Zach Curtis came up, and basically Jake Thompson was the initial roster spot.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, really.
That's a little slow there. Sorry, Frank.
He was asleep at the wheel.
So when Lively went on the DL, the roster spot was immediately filled by Thompson in the bullpen. And so what ended up happening was they sent Thompson down, and Victor Arano went on the disabled list, unfortunately, because he was playing so well. And that gave them room for another reliever, and they went with lefty Zach Curtis so that they would have a second lefty in the bullpen. And then Zach Eflin is here to take Ben Lively's rotation spot. So the Phillies, when they called Thompson up, I think they had him around to be a long man when they needed a long man, and the other day they needed a long man. They got 3+ innings out of him, which is enough to, unfortunately, like the last time, send him to the minors.
Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com, at Frank Klose for the Phillies Mailbag, and you can always send him your mailbag questions. and listen for them right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. He appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, guys.